Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to our channel. It's called Konservite. It's a Bulgarian channel, and we have been kindly invited by our hosts from Alternative for Germany to participate in one of their events. Yesterday we participated in a wonderful roundtable with Senator Richard Black. Today we have with us Professor Dr. Harald Weil. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, Professor.
You're very welcome.
It's a pleasure to be in Berlin and to be hosted by your fraction. Professor Weil is in the EU Foreign Affairs Committee, if I am not mistaken. And could you please just tell us a few words about yourself? Because you're in academia, which is quite a relatively comfortable job security place. And to go from academia into a rather super intensive political life, that's quite a step. So it takes some tough decisions. How did you end up in politics and in AfD?
Okay. So before 20 years of academia, I survived 5 years of normal employment, and within these 5 years, 3 years of self-employment. So survived 5 years of self-employment before joining academia. And joining academia, starting with my master thesis, or German way Diplomarbeit at that time, mid-80s, I was very interested in this European affairs, history, culture, and its economic planning and consequences so far. And what amazed me most when I did my master thesis, when I did my PhD thesis, to see all the critique which was launched right from the start. In the 60s, 70s, you can hear more substantial and open-minded critique of the whole thing than today, where there seems to be only one opinion allowed, and that it's good and it will go even better, even closer, and ever better. So, and in these 20 years of academia, I noticed a decline of standards and concerning teaching, education and research, and a decline most significantly of policy. No matter if it's policy in terms of education or directed towards education, or say the military, the foreign policy stuff, and the domestic policy, first of all. There was no management or whatsoever. It was a letting go, letting things happen, and only reacting to the oil crisis of the 70s, reacting of the military crisis of the 80s, reacting that way to the changes of the 90s, which were not really exploited for the betterment of things. I've seen there was no compass, no real roadmap. It was just an acting and enlargement for the sake of enlargement without doing any substantial reform before. There was always discussion of reform, the need of reform, substantial reform, not only cosmetics, and it never happened. The contrary happened. The old Kinderkrankheiten, so the sicknesses of the childhood, they never grew out, and they added problems and sickness, and the vitality of it all faded away. We've seen it since the year 2000, the Lisbon strategy, so-called, making Europe the most innovative economic area of the world, most growth in workplaces, most growth in GDP and stuff like that. And what was the end of it? Well, before the crisis, the financial crisis of 2008-9 following, it was the least growing economy. It was the least area which could handle quality migration, and the least able area to have any influence of any problem in the world, let it be right before your door or faraway countries. And all that what we've seen in Afghanistan, what we've seen in the Western Balkans, well, lessons not learned again and again. And so I joined policy as sort of self-defense. Yeah, because even the academic life, we had this Bologna reform, we had this payment reforms, we had this grammar reform. It all started with, and well, here we go, here we are.
So to put it in other words, Professor, you experienced from your perspective as an academic person, that you have the feeling that the direction and the intent of the big European project has changed with the years, and from your perspective it has not changed in the way it should go and develop, and this was for you one of the triggers to say, okay, I want to give my opinion on those changes and to make an echo that something is not happening the way it should be. And this was for you the moment where you decided effectively to join the politics in Germany. And how did you end up currently in Alternative for Germany?
Yeah, I started with the free voters in 2009 with the European elections of 2009. And these free voters, they gained 10% of the seats in Bavaria. And they were a competitor of the CSU, the monopolistic party, conservative party of Bavaria, and they tried to expand, to participate in the European election and to get into the other 15 German countries, Länder. And well, actually, I could stick with my expertise. I had this world market and European economy and European Union stuff I dealt with for 20 years. And then I tried to put one thing or another into practice and do some coaching towards these things. And the program was very similar. It was substantial reforms of the EU, and if it's not possible, to try another approach within another juridical framework and with the same participants as far as they want to learn, play by the rules and play by better rules. And then 2013, the AfD came out of the predecessing elections. There was an effort to join or to do something together with the free voters, and it failed. And so a new initiative, a new party had to be born, and that was in 2013. And I joined well before the elections, the federal elections of 2013 changed from, I had to, because there was no merger, changed from free voters to AfD, which was very, very similar in the program towards EU in general, migration, and this, well, connected with the EU, this euro currency, this joint currency, and the harmonization madness, to harmonize things which better should not be harmonized, and seeing it all as a race to the bottom. Well.
Professor, you said that you joined in 2013. You joined Alternative for Germany. Could you please tell our viewers, because from probably many of them, what were these people, the AfD, Alternative for Germany, Alternative für Deutschland, so that's why we abbreviated AfD. So who are these guys in the AfD? Because if you open the mainstream media, the only thing we hear, these are the neo-Nazis of Germany, these are the neo-fascists, this is the extreme right, the populist right. What are you fighting for? Why is there such a stigma on your party first? And what is actually the alternative that you fight for? And how do you feel with all this criticism that is constantly poured on your organization?
When you look at the past decades, you see that every new party or movement which said, even before the 90s and before reunification, that things like migration, which are managed in the way they are, lead to problems. In domestic policy and abroad, at the end, it helps nobody. It may sound or look good, but it adds problems and enlarges the problems, actually. And everybody who had this critique on the present policy and management or non-management of real existing problems was framed as right-wing and racist, and this framing got worse and worse. And before AfD, it was the free voters. Well, my friends asked me, are you sure that there are not too much right-wing NS Nazis? And before besides the free voters, when you look up the comedians and the critique and the fun made out of conservative or liberal thoughts, it was only the FDP, formerly liberal party, now acting as a sort of proxy, as another left-wing party, but formerly liberal. They were framed that way. Yeah, it's only a party they just for the it's just for the rich people. They don't like foreigners, and it's all about curbing down taxes. That's the taxes. That was the FDP, and then free voters got framed, but they escaped because the AfD emerged as the new bully. Well, those are the ones. It's so nice, and these people, they say it's not so nice, and they must be bad, and don't listen to them because they have a hidden agenda or an open agenda which we utterly reject. When I actually approached and just my only information was about the mainstream media framing this person, this person who said this and the other things. That always the same person, always the same half citations, etc. I said, well, I will look at it myself. I will see what's the program of these folks. Well, sounds good, and for me even familiar. Sounds good. And then I go to the information, so-called Stammtisch, info Stammtisch. I want not only to see what are they writing and speaking, but who is speaking. Are they, well, you have certain ideas how real existing Nazis or so must look like. So, and they did not look like, they did not talk like, they did not write like, and they did not act like. It was on the contrary. Actually, we have, I think, the most, one of the highest or the highest level of internationality with our peoples. So we have this migration, many people with migration background, which have this background by themselves or by their partners, by their spouses, etc. Within AfD, yes, within AfD. And I think it's more international than anything else. And when you look at the pictures, who is acting, who are the cadres of the party, you see with the Greens and the left, it's all white, it's all German. And if it's not, then it's, well, foreigners who are lefties like the Germans, but the right-wing parties, they are, as I said, it's framed, but we actually are more international and openly, and we live this in our party, and our program says nothing else. We are not generally against migration. We are against importing problems in your homeland and not solving problems abroad. And there's a terrible connection with it.
Very interesting point. I think it will be great if you can exactly explain a little bit more about the current agenda of the AfD in the German Bundestag. What are you fighting for? What is the genesis of the party, and what you would like to change currently in the German domestic policy?
So the first big change would not be, well, we have to create many new laws and stuff like that. It's all about realizing and enforcing the rules and laws who are already there. We are living in a state where the law is overruled by the facts, or by the actions or non-actions of ministers or the Chancellor Merkel, who said, well, it doesn't work with the at the frontier. We cannot have any frontier management, any border management, etc. And now I think these days this G7 goes on in Elmau, and for this purpose, almost perfect border controls are installed for a couple of days because they want to be endangered, and the day after it's gone, and the inflow of illegal migrants, etc., comes in. It's absolutely unlawful. So the unlawful management or non-management of migration, which has to be stopped and can be stopped legally in a very short time.
You mean illegal migration?
Illegal migration, yes. And the currency thing, it's all about, the last decades are all about breaking the existing laws and treaties. firstly bending them well a little bit, and then you break it. And so even the national courts have nothing against it, and it's certainly not the Luxembourg court for the European Union has nothing against the breaking of its own laws, so to speak.
The European Court of Justice, just to clarify.
Exactly, yes. And that's the trend. So the first thing is re-establishing the rule of law in all levels: migration, currency, economics, and, well, instead they try to impose new laws. Well, let's forbid the mobility as we know it, and let's enforce e-mobility not by the market decision, not by science, but by law. So the law gets misused, new laws get introduced, and old laws and treaties are forgotten or twisted besides and well over to be ever recognized. So it's all against its purpose, and that's the big difference between what's written and what was practiced before and what is practiced now in many areas for decades. And there is no consciousness about this. And actually, it's a psychological trait that, well, you get used to. You get used to, well, 1, 2, 3 days, unnormal things, unnormality turn into normality. So I think that's the psyche of the 30s worked when you see, well, there is some law, but there is some new law now, and there's a power which is forcing it upon us, and so I rather join them. Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong and I'm mistaken, but AfD is now for the second legislative period in the Bundestag. Right. Exactly. How do you feel, is the other parties feel about AfD and this agenda of re-establishing the rule of law, which is very interesting indeed. Do they see it similar way? Do you have any progress in convincing also the other parties that this is a necessary agenda?
Well, actually, the business plan and the agenda of the other parties is taking advantage of the existing laws, of the non-enforced laws, and taking advantage of breaking the laws. So they are on the side that profits from it. Actually, we were the biggest opposition party in the last terms with 12.6%, and well, in the second term it's 10.5%. We might be not the biggest, nominally the biggest opposition party, but you are the only one in terms of the content. Mm-hmm. So you can say they are all other 5 or 6 parties, they are against us. They are all in against us. I compare it with the competition on the financial market, so to speak, where I spent half a decade before entering academic life. I was in the financial services thing. And when you look at insurance, for instance, you have more than 100 companies in all fields, covering most or all fields of insurance. And now comes a new company which says, well, the half of the contracts you have, they are superfluous and bad. You don't need the contracts our non-buddies were selling you for decades or centuries. You only need half of those useless contracts. Yeah? And those contracts you can buy for the half price. And that's us. And so it's quite understandably that 100 competitors join and prevent a new company which has better products to enter the market at all. And so we are cut off from funding wherever they can manage it. We have a foundation. All other parties, they have foundations which raise their income from 2 million digits, I think 40, 50, 60 million, to hundreds, I think it's about 400 or 500 millions today in the era of Chancellor Merkel. And they are a party besides the party. They have offices abroad, they are influencing foreign policy, etc. And it's a lot of money, it's all taxpayers' money, and we are cut off from this funding. Not very legally, I suppose. Yeah. And the same comes when it comes to the Vice Speaker of the House, where we are denied the right of a House vice speaker of the house, which all parties have and had before. We are cut off, stripped off.
You don't have any vice speaker?
No.
Are you not obliged to have it? Each party should have a vice speaker.
Yeah, should and could. What did I say about laws and rules, and especially about not clear written rules? They take it and twist it to their advantage and to keep us away from these positions. Even the chairs of committees. We had 4 committees, and that's in the last period, in the last election periods, we could actually man 4 seats, the 4 seats, because they played by the rules then, yeah, a little bit more by the rules than today. And in this period, we have 3 seats of committees, 3 chairs, and we are denied all of them. So that's the new norm. On the grounds, well, it's not exactly written, and we interpret what's written or not written in the way that you are not person. You can, of your 80, we are 80 members of the party, of the fraction. Well, whoever you are proposing, it's not acceptable. So you can be a professor, you can have 20 years of work experience, you might have paid hundreds of thousands of your own taxpayer euros, etc. But they prefer people who broke up their studies and had only a political career only, and are perhaps young of age. Nobody cares.
I assume in this working environment it's also very difficult for you to pass any laws, resolutions, proposals to move on. Are you successful in this?
They are denied, but depending the subject matter, sometime reality forces them to act, at least nominally. Well, they may introduce this or that, but it's not enforced, not at the borders, not at the European Central Bank, not anywhere. But they are forced to address the problems we named before. And we were the first who named before, in most cases.
So, of course, you have legislative initiative. You have the right to it, and it's in your constitution that every political party has the right to legislative initiative. How do your laws, what kind of life do they live? When you propose a law under your legislative initiative, what end do your laws make? How do they get perceived? What is...
They get rejected, and it's not, there's really no reporting about it. So the mass media, the quality media, the mainstream media, not only the state media, but also the private media, is shadow banning us. That means whatever is our initiative and however it's visible, well, what the party, the ruling party or another party is proposing now goes into that direction or is more or less the same the other party proposed 1 year ago or some months ago. So when we introduce things, there's not no report on it. The only thing which they seek to report or to create and to enforce and to enlarge is personal scandals, which are really not, when you look at it, mostly much less clear than what is with the other parties. For instance, the mask business. There was a big scandal of the then ruling party and now opposition party, CDU, which had several members in Bavaria and outside of Bavaria who did contracts and had received kickbacks in the six digits, hundreds of thousands they made. So, well, it's a problem, it doesn't look good, and we have to act, and while this may step back or get out of the party, this person of the CDU was more than one person, but in the juridical process, the prosecution was, well, it was not actually against the law. It was not that explicit. The law was not explicit, so the crime is not explicit and not there, and then who cares? So. And that's our real scandals, and they are in a quality and in a quantity which our so-called scandals do not reach. So they're looking at every small spot on our West but the totally big spots, etc., they get forgotten immediately. And the only reporting which is done about us is not the reporting in our favor, but to enforce and prolong this framing. And well, mostly it's the same scandals about the same people. Well, this person said this and that 2 years ago or 5 years ago or even 10 years ago before the party existed, and that's, you know, whatever these people say or propose, written or oral, it's, you know, whom it comes from. Those are all.
Dear viewers, ladies and gentlemen, I think we can continue in the second part of our video because I think it was a good introduction to first talk about AfD internally, some internal German politics as well, about yourself, about the party. And in the second part, we'll continue with a little bit more of international politics, geopolitics. It's quite an intensive arena right now, the geopolitics. So I think it will be interesting for our viewers to hear the second part with more international bit. Thank you so much, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome again to our second part of the conversation. In the first part of our talk with Professor Weil, we discussed internal German politics. But now, let's turn to the international arena. There is a new geopolitical reality unfolding as we speak. We don't have to discuss long about the war going on in Ukraine right now. The sanctions that Europe imposed, 6 or 7 rounds of unheard of sanctions, and Germany being on the forefront of this actually. How does it affect the German economy? What is, for example, the Nord Stream 2, it's 99.9% finished. I think it's technically finalized. It's all about legislative and juridical finalization process, but it got completely stopped. We know that you impose sanctions, you plural, the you in the EU, led by German effort, of course, in the EU as well. We as the EU impose sanctions on Russia, very many. But the German economy needs Russia inevitably, be it good or bad. How do you see the new political reality unfolding? How will it affect the German economy, and what do you see coming up next?
Well, it influences the economy in a terrible way. But firstly, we have to state that it's also misused as a pretext. It's Putin and Putin's war, which makes energy and fuel, etc., so expensive. Well, this development started before, and it's due to German policy concerning energy and fuel, alternative energies who can't provide the energy which is needed, which forces you back on coal, oil, gas, etc., and which created the problem well in advance for decades. And the other thing, as you said, it's unprecedented sanctions. It's actually, I would call it, it's economic war. There is an announced economic world war going on, which was not going on in that way in the first and second, whether in these world wars or in the time after these world wars. And that's a big experiment, and I think it's a big misjudgment of things in this. When you impose sanctions which hurts you more than the country or people you want to address with this, then it's a clear thing which becomes more and more visible, let's say, day by day. And I actually see the return. We have more sanctions. We have actually announced economic world war. Which tells us that the Cold War never was over, more or less. And this may lead to another thing we've seen in the Cold War, that, Russia and China, the Sino-Soviet complex, it was called at that time, that was one point of gravitation, and there was a bloc-free world announced in Indonesia in 1955, Suharto, in Indonesia, Bandung, Conference of Bandung, and that was the birth of the bloc-free movement, which was composed mainly of small and big developing countries, most of which were colonies back then in the 50s and 60s, and so this decolonization
The non-aligned movement. movement.
The non-aligned, right. This decolonization, non-aligned movement re-emerges, in my opinion, and it's a much different economic position. The G7 countries, where they threw out the Russians 2014 after they joined in a few years before, they turned G8 to G7, it was half or more than half of the world's GDP. Yeah, so no, the G7 in our world of today, the 2020s, it's well, some 40, well under, much under 50%. So the leverage you have is quite a different one. The leverage is on the side of your opponent, more or less. The non-alliance of yesterday are the non-alliance of today. And, well, sort of the Chinese and Russian economically sort of joined that. And that was pre-visible, and it's realizing in front of our eyes. And we see that the numbers, you can get nervous, you see the numbers, but it has to be translated into material effect when there's no more gas at the gas station, when there is no more food in the supermarket, etc. Yeah, as long as it concerns luxury items, okay, no problem, or only the problem of few people. But as it is the basic needs, then the problem starts.
Curious what you say. So obviously the absolutely inflated prices of energy right now, they certainly affect the German economy. They certainly affect the German consumer. But what you said is that, of course, the war exacerbated those processes. It made them worse, but you said it had already started, this energy crisis, this price inflation, etc. So do you see this as a structural problem that the Russian, so what I heard is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that's a structural problem already existing within the German economy that only got worse with the war. Is this correct? That's
correct. All this alternative energy stuff, this renewable stuff is not really working. There is not enough, the basis is not big enough, and technically it is not possible to create a constant flow, constant and big enough to overcome the time when there's no sun shining and no wind blowing. It's as simple as that. So you artificially build another net with this renewable energies, which is not stable, and it doesn't matter if it consists of 33,333 windmills, wind turbines, or the double of it. Yeah.
In fact, news from the last days, is that Germany will reopen some of the coal mines. Yes. And considering the fact that also Germany decided to go a path of shutdowning the nuclear power plants, and I think in the end of this year the last 3 power plants in Germany have to be plugged out, given the fact that obviously we're not still there to be able to secure energy from alternative fuels, given the fact that we will have probably in Europe gas issues with delivery and the supplier of gas. How do you expect that Germany will be able to sustain its role as the engine, the economic power engine in Europe and in the world? Or we will face in Germany and in Europe, of course, a phase of stagnation and financial crisis?
The German economic and industrial base is already eroded. Those high energy prices of the past led to a disadvantage for the German economy and industry, which is sort of compensated by the EU thing. So when it's too expensive, when work is too expensive here and energy is too expensive here, you can move to Czech Republic or Bulgaria, Romania, etc. Yeah, and that takes place with all it is connected with a sort of brain drain, with a sort of unemployment rising in the country, which enforces the high prices on work and on energy, what we are talking about right now. And on the other side, the neighbors, German neighbors, can, at one side, they must suffer from German, say, indolence or stupidity concerning the border management, for instance. So if Germany has a giant intake from all over the world, and after they are in Germany, they go somewhere else, yeah, and producing whatever problems or solving it. And on the other side, the German neighbors profit from it, because the old French and Belgium and Polish nuclear plants, they are very kind and friendly to deliver the energy Germany refused to produce itself in a more safer and modern way, and to a good price, a price among friends, I suppose. And on the other side, also, Germany has to pay for the imported energy. And it has to be pay for the exporter too, because when the sun is shining as it is today, when the wind is blowing from time to time as it blows, then you have excess energy which is destroying your net, and then you have to ask your neighbors, well, please take our energy, our net will break down. Then, okay, we can manage, we take this and that, and for a good price, a price among friends.
Being a non-expert myself, what you say sounds suicidal economically. It does, because the German industrial base used to be, and still is, quite a monster. It's as Senator Black put it yesterday, it's a very muscular industrial economy, which it still is, Germany. And is it not just logical? It's evident to the non-expert me, and is it not logical to people who are in power, whose only job description is to think of the future of Germany? Okay, let's make the most basic and natural calculation. We have a colossal industrial base that needs colossal energy. How should we solve that? So it doesn't look intuitive to me that Germany has taken this suicidal course. And where will it lead?
It's actually a pathology. I would say it's a pathology starting in the culture, in the socio-cultural complexity of everlasting presence of the past, as one weekly magazine posted, and which is, by the way, a good joke, because all this windcraft thing was exactly tried. It was an Englishman who found out, an English journalist, just forgot the name, James Delingpole, great blogger and radio guy. Well, that in the German occupation of Ukraine after 41, there was the big idea to get all the energy from windmills, and there were giant constructions from wood, and so it sounds so bizarre, but and I don't think that anybody is very much aware of it. But you can read it up, you can look it up, yeah, at the magazines of that time. But now it's all about saving the planet. It's a substitute for religion. The climate discussion, which started decades ago, and it led to a state of mind where you only concentrate on one thing, one goal. You say, well, this carbon is the killer problem, and then you sort of commit suicide, economic suicide, because you are afraid to die. Yeah, and that has nothing to do with enlightenment. That has nothing to do with science and with a holistic view on things. It's just driven by lobbies, by communication, by hysteria, which, well, and the structures who profit from this very hysteria, who make their money, whatever the outcome is at the end.
And they're powerful structures.
Absolutely.
Professor Weil, let's move on to one very interesting topic also for our viewers. Currently, there are ongoing discussions in the European Union of the enlargement of the European Union to have new countries that will join the Union from West Balkans, North Macedonia, Albania. Speaking now from the latest days also about Ukraine, probably as a candidate state, Moldova as well. You told us that currently you are participating in a commission in the EU Foreign Affairs within the Bundestag. Could you give us your view of those processes? Are they reasonable? Where are we going with those processes, and what to expect from those discussions?
Well, they are not as reasonable as they may seem for the first sight. So they are partially futuristic and utopistic and partially anachronistic at the same time. When you look at the, well, say, natural evolution of European affairs and cooperation, you see it started with the big countries, started with France and Germany, and Italy joined. And besides of that, and even before that, there was, I think it's quite comparable to the situation now with the West Balkan countries. The small West European countries, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, right after the First World War, they created a customs union, sort of customs union, and ever since they had a sort of union in economic way and juridical way, and the movement of capital and people was no problem. There were small countries, the structure was not that different. They were quite, not really homogeneous, but quite comparable, and they had an integration process themselves. And those three countries joined, the three small countries which constituted a middle country in terms of population and growth, they joined this 2 or 3 partner approach when it was EU 6. And then the enlargement came, EU 9, 12, and 81 Greece joined, 86 Portugal and Spain joined, and then the big enlargement when even Austria and the Mediterranean small countries joined, and the Eastern enlargement. So I think it's quite interesting, and it shows that there are alternatives. I think the Western Balkan Customs Union, which was discussed and practiced in some part. I think there is a transport union right now, which is already and practically and materially realized, and has and makes sense, and enhances the possibility of and for economic interaction and growth of GDP, etc., etc. And that's for its own sake. I think the development which can be done between more or less comparable or homogeneous countries can go much faster than when you combine it with bigger countries which have a different structure, which force their productivity on you, which force you to raise prices for food, which force you to get rid of this small and medium-sized structure in agriculture, in trade, and in industry too, which force the big-scale economies and players on you. And that's inevitable. So, and on the other side, you can say, well, I see there is a certain disadvantage and structural breaks. I throw a lot of money in special funding, social projects to compensate that. But it actually never worked. It created a social sector funded and heavily subsidized without any end in sight, permanent and growing subsidies for the social, economic and social cultural problems. And the industry is going down, down, down. First, your agriculture goes down because the productivity difference. Second, the small merchants go down because the nice supermarket of whoever French or German comes along, and your industrial structures, you hope, well, there's some automotive industry coming in, or we are even able to build cars when a foreign investor invests in a car factory, or even components. Well, that's nice. That is done even in Macedonia. Yeah, North Macedonia, it is done. There are quite a few German and Austrian automotive equipment deliverers. It was even in Ukraine the case. But now comes along, well, European means European Union, that's climate and world, saving the world and the climate. and that means get rid of your automotive stuff. It's all electric now. So build electric cars or batteries with which economic and environmental problems, whatever, but there's a new deal, and you are forced to destroy your own structures. Yeah, starting from agriculture, and it ends up, or it starts with the educational sector. It's a nice thing to travel abroad. It's a nice thing to spend time abroad, and not being forced for that purpose to wear a uniform and join and go to other countries with arms. That's a very nice thing. And you come back with the ideas you've seen, you come back with the realities you see. Perhaps after the big hype, new countries, very, very interesting. There is some backlash, you see the problems. You not only see the sunny sides, you see some problems. And when these problems turn out to be to become your problems, you think twice or three times. So at the end, where's the balance between advantage and disadvantage, dangers and chances? And it's quite a mixed picture, and the way it is done right now, it's a terrible thing, because the substantial reform did never happen. No matter if small or big, if one or more than one countries joined, the problems, they got more or less fixed, yeah, cemented, and more money is thrown upon it, and that leads to the fact that not problem solving is your business plan, but letting the problems go on.
Speaking of one big problem, at least from our Bulgarian perspective, and in the context of EU enlargement, is of course North Macedonia. You may be aware, or maybe not, but Bulgaria has imposed a veto on the starting of the EU accession talks and negotiations between North Macedonia and the European Union. France has taken on an initiative because France right now, is hosting the Council of the European Union, and there is a Macron initiative. Please remove your veto, and we promise that we will be a guarantor for A, B, C, D. Do you see Germany joining this initiative? And what is, because at least for us in Bulgaria, that's an extremely sensitive topic. And there is, I would even say, a majority consensus, societal consensus about this issue. Is Germany likely to join this effort? And what is Germany's view on this? I don't know if in the EU Foreign Affairs Committee, of course, you might have heard of, you probably have well heard of this issue.
Well, it's very likely that Germany sooner or later does what others, and especially France, expect him to do.
Why this pressure?
Or not to do. Well, it comes to the hard selling argument. You want to achieve this and that with the accession of one country, and you are like on the phone trying to sell financial products or so. You have to buy now because tomorrow the offer is off. And that shows that it's not that serious as it seems at the first sight. So it's a diplomatic affair, and besides that, you can characterize the EU and its predecessors as a thing where only happens what France wants, and only when France it wants. But there's a problem with the time. You have to wait a little bit, a second approach or a third. But at the end, it happens what France wants. And that's not generally bad. We've seen it with this taxonomy and the introduction of nuclear power. It's green power. It's carbon free, so take it. And the German Greens and all 6 green German parties, except AfD, had to accept it. Yeah, not fond of it, but had to accept it. And the same might happen with these approaches, where this is actually quite the opposite what Monsieur Macron proposes in the terms of Ukraine and the other West Balkan states. That means there's possibility of 2. No, there's not only one Union, there's two unions and two paces. Things can happen, and we can do it only gradually and concerning some fields of some branches of industry, of foreign policy, etc. There's a joint effort possible, but not the general accession as a full member as he opposes with Turkey. Yeah, and the North Macedonia thing, it's a contradiction to that, and maybe he will make up his mind, or things will turn away that it makes no sense, or I don't know.
It's curious that there is such an extreme urgency on this. You must remove the veto right here and now, exactly like you say. By this or tomorrow, the offer is off. It's as you said, it's rather contradiction. Not to mention that accession process with Turkey started in 1960s, 62, I think.
Yeah, I think it's the 59th year. Yeah,
exactly.
Heading towards 60th anniversary. Yeah. Yes. So you could say, well, it's not a big problem. Well, let's put them on hold, and problems will disappear if you don't deal with it. So.
Conscious about the time, probably one last question, because it's an important one also for our viewers, and given the fact that in Bulgaria there are, let's say, discussions on our candidate status for the Eurozone. It's now under discussion if Bulgaria in 1 or 2, 3 years will be part of the Eurozone, and to effectively take the euro as the currency that is applicable in Bulgaria. I know that, of course, Germany has done this 2-3 years ago. From your perspective as a politician and as German citizen, what is your view? Should we take this step and be part of the famous club of the rich one, or is this not the right moment at all? How is your view on this?
Well, you see that it's creates the joint currency creates many problems already for more or less all existing countries, all member countries of it, where at one side there's profiting from it, you get access to credit, and you are not forced to enforce any structural reforms, and that's for the long-term development bad, when it's all about credit and not about restructuring evolution of economic system in one country. And I think you should look very, very closely on the positive effects of non-membership in the Eurozone when you see how it works in Poland, which has, I think, one of the biggest growth rates of GDP. And when you see the infrastructure which is built up, and the Scandinavian countries, which are Euro member countries. So you see the sovereignty they have, you see the productivity which is connected with this question, and their advantages in foreign trade within the European Union and with the trade with third countries. Yeah. Look very closely on these examples and don't get impressed or depressed while there's the nice Eurozone world where things are even better than in the rest of the European Union. There is much more empirical evidence and examples that also this side of the European affairs has more disadvantages than advantages.
Yeah, because in Bulgaria, for example, there is not even a real debate. Some smaller media channels like ours, of course, we discussed. We had a wonderful guest on our show about 3 or 4 months ago who explained wonderfully well how we should not join, why we should not join, etc. But with these little exceptions, there is almost no debate in our country, which is rather weird. Our country is almost not. It looks like yet again urgency. It's imposed on us. Nobody's asking us. Nobody's going to speak about referendum, and that's notable. That's notable. There is no debate. Again, imposed. Take it now. Do it here and now. Why? Why this rush? I have no clue.
I think the mainstream media is in for the money, and it executes the things the government and the masses want. Cheap credit, it's about gifts, it's not about hard work, etc. And that's the psychology of a bad trade and a hard sell on the telephone. Reject it, please.
Professor, I can only say one great big thank you for your time today. Thanks to the organization for providing us the infrastructure for this interview. Thank you, Dobri, as well for this wonderful time. To our viewers, thank you so much for your attention, for seeing this. Of course, our conversation went quite a bit around Germany. We are in Germany, you are invited in Germany, but it's only natural because Germany is the motor, the engine of the EU. So what happens in Berlin really matters a lot. Well, Professor, you said yesterday something interesting, that they say France, Germany are the leaders of the EU, and it's like a tandem bike, where France is only cycling a lot on the back seat and somebody else is ruling. But that's a whole other topic altogether.
Germany is France is...
Germany is on the back seat, constantly pedaling. Anyway, thank you so much yet again, and thanks to the viewers for their time and attention, and we hope to be here again.